Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Reed, Vedic astrologer with over 20 years of experience in the astrological field. If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with me, you can do so through my astrological services page, which you will see linked above. In addition to that, I have a course which starts in August, but which is presently open for early registration at a 10% discount until this coming Wednesday, the 8th of May. And this course is on the elements of the Panchangam, which are 5 components which can be used to understand the overall energy of any given day. And I use these in the composition of my regular lunar transit videos and articles. And if you're interested in further information on that course, you can find it at the link above. I have a very special guest today here with us, who is Lars Panaro. And Lars is going to talk to us a little bit about, or maybe even a lot, about the planets and the deities that are connected to them, about which there's a lot of confusion. So Lars, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Cool. Yeah, this is a kind of an esoteric topic. And of course, there are different arrangements, different associations. For example, when I went to the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference a couple years back, I was sitting in on Camilla Sutton's class on Saturn and Sadasati. And she was talking about how you can, do these like mantras for Shiva, for Saturn and stuff. And I was like, wait, but okay, a lot of texts say the sun is Shiva, not only Jaimini, but like a few other texts too that I've read. And then, I've seen Saturn as Brahma, I've seen Saturn as Vishnu. And so, I asked her about this and I didn't quite understand her answer. And nor do I remember at this moment. I think it was, a little bit over my head at the time is what I'll say. I think we were kind of talking in 2 different dimensions. So anyway, yeah, I've thought about this a lot, especially since then, of like, what is the utility of this astrologically? Like, what does it really mean? How does it help us interpret charts? Does it help us or does it hinder us and that kind of thing? So,
Sure.
yeah, that's where I'm at with it. And as we talked a little bit before we got started, the inspiration to talk about this was I had posted about going to a really good local Indian restaurant where I live called Annapurna. And I was thinking about how it was on a Saturday, and I was thinking about how, like, oh, wow, this place is like really beautiful, really aesthetic, a lot of colors and stuff. And it's reminding me a lot of Venus right now. And it's reminding me of like the intersection of Saturn and Venus and how, Parashara and others say that they're friends, and how in Jaimini, he gives Vishnu to Saturn and he gives Lakshmi to Venus. And of course, those 2 are consorts. So I had posted about that on Facebook and a couple people were like, how is Saturn Lord Vishnu? How can that be? And so I thought, yeah, instead of writing like a big essay on this, like maybe I'll just talk to somebody about it in a video, which is what we're doing now. And yeah, where to start with this, I guess. Like it's kind of an odd place to start, but rather than go like through the planets one by one, yeah, I thought I would just start by talking about this Saturn Vishnu concept. And of course, for those who know, Jaimini also gives Mercury to Vishnu. It's kind of an interesting situation, what Jaimini describes in that chapter on basically devotion and yoga and whatnot, looking at the 12th house from Swamsha. And did you want to say something about that?
I was going to say, well, 2
Cool.
different things. One thing, which is, why would you say that there is simultaneously a Saturn connection to Vishnu and a Mercury connection with Vishnu, and the distinguishment between the 2? And do you want to define for people who may not know what the Swamsha is? Because I probably have a lot of viewers who may not have an idea as to what the concept is.
Yeah, so Swamsha is also sometimes called Karakamsha, and it's basically the position of the Atmakaraka planet, which is the planet with the highest degree out of 30 in a given sign. it's that planet's position in the Navamsha, the D9. So you basically like you find what the planet is, and that sign becomes the Swamsha. And that's called Katakamsha when you look at relative to the birth chart itself, to the Rashi chart itself. I think I just cut out there for a moment, but so when you put that sign back into the Rashi chart, it's sometimes called Katakamsha, and basically something about the deeper nature of the person, or just kind of like why they're here, or but Jaimini just uses it basically as like a more important version of the ascendant, is what it seems like. Although there's a lot of debate on even like how to find it and calculate it,
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting. But Jaimini does explicitly tell us that, we're to look at the 12th from Swamsha for basically moksha and spirituality and things like this. And that is the chapter where he talks about the deities as associated with each of the planets. And just real quick, this is a little esoteric, but he also tells us that if the Swamsha is an even sign, that we count the houses from it backwards.
Exactly.
So the sign that's normally second from like if it was a Scorpio Swamsha, right? Sagittarius becomes the 12th house. Capricorn becomes the 11th house, right? So that's just something to keep in mind and experiment with if you never have. I like to do that. I find that it works pretty well, though it is kind of counterintuitive first.
Yeah, if it's okay, I wanted to share something. Well,
sure.
one thing I wanted to say, because I think the connection was cutting out a little bit, for those who might have missed, you take the Atmakaraka and you look at its position in the Navamsha chart, what Rashi it's in, and that becomes the Swamsha. But you can also take the Atmakaraka position in any Varga chart and do the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if that came across clearly, because the internet seemed to kind of be
Yeah.
jumping in and out on us. So I just wanted to clarify for people. But also, do you want to explain to people why it's reverse from the even signs?
Honestly, I actually don't remember the rationale for that. Why is it? Yeah, why is it? Well, to me, part of it is that like you get this sort of floating feel with Swamsha and with reading the houses and signs from Swamsha. Like it's almost like it's just floating somewhere in the midst of the Rashi chart with its more astronomically based houses. But it has something to do with, like, I think Jaimini, he may relate it to feet, like the Pada technique. Something like, like you're, yeah, that's it. That's it.
I was going to say something that I had heard too was the concept of yin and yang. So the even signs are more receptive.
Sure.
So you're going to kind of reverse it for the even signs, whereas the odd signs, which are like Aries, for people who don't know, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius, they're more active. And so that's the way that I had always heard it put in that particular capacity.
Yeah, I think that makes abundant sense as well. Yeah, cool. So anyway, so we look at this 12th from Swamsha to get information on the kind of like classically the deity that the person might propitiate, worship, or do some kind of sadhana or yoga sadhana associated with, right? And so, Saturn to Vishnu and Mercury to Vishnu. Well, the interesting thing here is, first of all, these are both neuter planets. Traditionally in Jyotish, a lot of texts give that they're neuter in terms of their gender, right? Neither male or female. And Lord Vishnu is very much like that as well. I mean, he's personified as a male, but he's really the all-pervading aspect of the divine. He's impersonal, essentially impersonal. And I would say that Saturn is the most impersonal of, the 7 traditional grahas, right? The 7 traditional planets. Saturn's farthest away. He's the darkest. He's at the edge of the solar system that we can see visibly. He moves the slowest. So he's really the most impersonal of the planets. And then Mercury is interesting because Mercury is the closest to the sun, which is basically a symbol of, the all-encompassing Godhead. Brahman, so to speak. And in certain sects of I don't know, like post-Vedic thought, Shiva becomes synonymous with that all-encompassing divine Brahman. So at a certain point, we're not necessarily talking about like Shiva of the Trimurti, although I don't want to rule that out, but we're talking about Shiva as this like all-embracing consciousness. And so so Mercury is very close to the sun, and there are some occult books that say Mercury and the sun are one. They're essentially one, and so on. And Mercury also being neuter, Mercury being like a shapeshifter, you know, taking on whatever form is needed by the planets and signs he associates with. You know, this is, to me, this is all very Vishnu. You know, Vishnu becomes all these different avatars. He becomes male, female, animal, part man, part animal, you know, in all these different places at all these different times based upon the need. And there's a great book I have from this tarot deck I have called the Sacred India Tarot, and it actually has some fantastic mythological information about the Indian deities and whatnot. And yeah, the author talked about Vishnu as being like a trickster deity as well, which is also a very Mercurial Saturn thing, because they're both tricksters, right? Saturn puts on some kind of a facade, right? Saturn is like a deceptive sort of graha, you know, it covers things up very often. And Mercury, like we just said, is that, you know, trickster archetype, that shapeshifter, just kind of taking on whatever is needed at the time, and oftentimes screwing things up, you know, which is why he's been said to rule earthquakes by some older texts as well. It's like he can be like the cog in the machine, you know, he just sort of gets in there and kind of fools around, you know, kind of plays around and is like, oh, are you really what you say you are? Are you really interested? You know, like it reminds me of in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where basically Gilgamesh, when he comes to this being at the bottom of the sea, I think it's a woman deity. She's like saying, well, don't you want like riches? Don't you want all these like great worldly things? And he's basically like, no, like I want immortality, you know? And she keeps asking him. The same thing happens in the Katha Upanishad with Yama, you know, telling the young man, like, I can't answer your question about the ultimate nature of reality and the ultimate destination of the soul. Like, don't you want riches? Don't you want cows? Don't you want women? And it's like, that's a very Mercurial thing, you know, like testing. So, and we see this too in like, you know, if you read the Bhagavad Gita and you really tune into like the vibe of Krishna, like Krishna is like, you get the notion that he's kind of poking fun at Arjuna throughout like the whole thing, to me at least. So I think these are a lot of the reasons for why Jaimini gives Saturn and Mercury as Vishnu. And I also wanted to say too that, again, Saturn is this very impersonal planet, and Saturn, according to this great Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi, who was also an astrologer, Saturn is talked about as the intellect, which is not the mind that most people think of the mind when they think of intellect. The intellect as like cold, hard, aloof reason, like this all-embracing kind of viewing point instead of like point of view opinion. And so I feel like Ibn Arabi giving Saturn over to like the intellect, this ability that we all have to like step back and see things like totally divorced from it for what they are, right? As like, okay, this is just what it is, I'm not in it, is in alignment with Jaimini of giving Saturn to Vishnu for all the reasons that I just explained. So it's kind of an interesting parallel there across, you know, these different religions and whatnot.
I just had an interesting, while you were talking, an interesting brain flash or brain fart, or call it whatever it is you want to call it.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, because Saturn, in terms of medical astrology, Saturn's kind of like the cosmic garbage man. His job is to get rid of all the garbage that's in the body, right? And Mercury rules the power of excretion. And so while that all may sound very like, you know, kind of gross or obscene in relation to something as wonderful as Vishnu, well, what Vishnu does is he just gets rid of all the stuff that's blocking you from being able to see purity, really. It was just interesting because while you were saying that, that popped into my mind. It was a connection I hadn't really made. So I was glad that you said what you said, and I forgot what it was that you said that triggered that, but something definitely did.
Cool. Probably just that Saturn and Mercury are both like a trickster
Yeah,
archetype
no,
in
definitely, definitely.
slightly different ways. And like actors can be associated with a strong Saturn because they have to wear a mask, for example,
Hmm.
as well. So like Saturn, Mercury, Venus can kind of come together to make people in theater and whatnot.
Hmm. Hmm. So we're going to take a break with this for the first part of the series, and you can look really soon for the second part of the series coming up.